You're up on YouTube.
Okay. I want to welcome everybody to the University Affairs meeting for March of 2021. I'm going to make a few personal comments and then we've got a full agenda and a couple of great presentations. So I'm excited about this meeting and love being back in Chapel Hill. My comments are centered around something I thought about a lot. And I walked around campus today, all around campus, about 9 miles to be exact. And you look at it and you see the beauty and the wonder that is Carolina. Like anything, it's not perfect, but it does present a few things I'd like to share. And I just want to be clear, they're personal points. First and importantly, this university is an amazing, amazing place. There's so much that goes on here that matters to so many people, not here, just here in this area, but in the state, nationally, and even internationally. This university, in my opinion, is better than it's ever been, especially in light of all we've been through with COVID and what it's brought out in people and so many people have done to help and care about others. Our research is strong, it's growing. We have incredible talent here in so many fields. We have the Carolina Covenant that we're so proud of. We have world-class undergraduate and graduate schools, both. We have so much to be proud of, and we should often sit back and take the time to be proud of it. Because I think sometimes the negative is the focus just because of today's environment. There are so many that are focused on negatives and especially using social media or subgroups to speak in a fashion that seems to speak for the whole. Social media loves to create herd mentality, and often that's not a good thing. That is obvious to anybody that pays attention to it. But we must, as a group and a university, both encourage and support open debate, civil discussion, freedom of speech, and academic freedom. Those are vital. I work in many areas of this university with different people, and I want to point out a couple positive examples. It's a pleasure to know positive, caring, and dedicated people in admissions and enrollment such as Rachel Feldman, Allison Legge, and Ashley Arthur. Those are the type of people that get up every day. They look forward to going to work and they love their job. And I'm fortunate to have gotten to know them through this role. I'm also very fortunate to be able to work on the Pandemic Research Readiness Initiative that's vital to Carolina, the state, and global. It's all about creating and being ready with the next antiviral vaccines and therapeutics that are needed for future pandemics that will come. It's called READY for Rapidly Emerging Antiviral Drug Discoveries. That group has an amazing, dedicated group of people like Ralph Barrick, Nat Mormon, John Bamforth, and many others that I could name. But these people work hard every day into the evening, on the weekends, and different times to do what Carolina can do like no other, bring incredible research and productivity to this state and help others at the same time. This thing could be as large as $1 billion initiative. There's no reason to not be behind this. I also receive press clippings and tweets and things that confound me like anybody. And two I want to mention are the law school issue with the young man, the group trying to ruin a person over a discussion in class. This is my opinion. We must have civil discussion and dialogue, not an attempt to ruin people on purpose. By the way, I purposely want to say I oppose pass-fail and always will. We all come here to compete, and that's important. That's what Carolina is. Two final points. I get statements from the AAUP quite often. It's a subset of the faculty group, and I do read the information, but they complain a lot in my opinion, and I just have to ask, does the AAUP actually mean the American Association of Unhappy Professors? Last, I saw the new Curtis Media Center going up, and so much on the science side and the hospital side. I just want to reemphasize, this place, this university has led what can become one of our greatest chancellors ever. This place is wonderful. This team of administrators is deeply committed. Let's keep this going and let's take time to appreciate the good. Thank you. Those are my personal comments, and we'll move forward with the meeting. And I'm excited about the first presentation, which is the program for public discourse with Sarah Truell. Sarah is the Bowman and Gordon Gray Term Professor in the Department of Political Science and Faculty Director for the Program for Public Discourse. I believe strongly in this program as the trustees do and others, and am excited about this program. I love it that she's the Bowman and Gordon Gray Professor, being from Winston-Salem and knowing their role at Carolina and all the Grays have done for Carolina. And I do want to mention that last night's program for the Public Discourse had 240 attendees. I don't want to take her thunder, so I'll let Sarah talk about it, which is great. There were plenty of questions that were answered, and the topic of the conversation was the future of conservatism. So I ask everybody to support this program. Let's be great as a university by supporting this program, and I welcome Sarah to the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. I think there's slides. I'm not sure if those are visible to people in the room, but hopefully they are. They're not. Oh, maybe it's starting now. There we are. Okay, give me 1 second here. Great, that looks good. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chuck, and thank you to the Board of Trustees for having both myself and also Kevin Marinelli. I'm Sarah Truhl. I'm a professor of political science and the faculty director for the Program for Public Discourse. I'm joined today somewhere on your screen with Kevin Marinelli. Kevin is a professor in communication studies here at UNC, and he's also the executive director for our program. Kevin takes the lead in much of the curricular work the program is currently doing, and I'm going to discuss that here shortly. If you could flip to slide 2 for those who can see the slides. Thank you. As you know, our program's goal is to support a strong culture of debate and deliberation here at UNC through both public programming and also work with the curriculum. The program's work is motivated by a concern that our students and also Americans more generally do not have many opportunities to practice engagement across differences. This is generally because they are hesitant to talk about contentious issues with people who disagree with them. Of course, there's also the broader problem of people not even interacting with people who are different than them. Political debates on TV are really of no help because often they end up relying mostly on partisan talking points. We want to ensure through our program that all UNC students are able to support their positions with facts and talk about the values that underpin those positions. So the next question is how? How can we do this? It seems like an insurmountable task sometimes. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we seek to achieve our goal in several interrelated ways. First of all, we have our public programming. This is the Abby Speaker Series, which was recently named. This brings in leading scholars, public intellectuals, and practitioners to discuss important issues like free speech on campus or the future of conservatism, which Chuck just mentioned was our event last night, which was highly successful. We did have over 240 people attend the event. Our registration numbers were almost to 500. It's a really great convergence rate. So we're always very pleased with that. And I'm happy to talk more about those rates for other events in the Q&A. Our goal is to bring in people, and we're committed to showing a variety of viewpoints in all of these discussions. We hope these events will help students see the benefits of a deliberative skill set that we are trying to encourage. This past year, we had 5 of these showcase events, not all called the Abby Speaker Series, simply because it wasn't named until recently. In July, we had a panel titled "What Principles Should Guide Our Lockdown Strategies for COVID-19 Now and in the Future," where we thoughtfully explored perspectives with leading experts in the protection of civil liberties, economic security, and also public health. In the fall semester, we held 2 large public events. The first one was Dialogue Across the Aisle with Robert George and Cornel West, and then one focused on free speech on campus, which Kevin actually moderated. So he'd be happy to talk more about that, I'm sure. This spring, we then hosted 2 panels, one on defining racial justice and the one last night on the future of conservatism. Again, I'm happy to talk more about the details of any of these in the Q&A. I also want to point out a few more things before I move on with the benefits of the programming before turning over to the curriculum. So first, one of the benefits of the pandemic has actually been our ability to adapt. And our ability to record our events has given them a life beyond the moment, and is certainly something we have capitalized on. For example, after each Abby Speaker Series event, we now hold small group conversations with the panelists and students, or ask the panelists to attend a class here at UNC. We call this continuing the conversation. In addition, the remote environment has expanded our reach. I already mentioned that we regularly are having around 500 people registering for our events, and many of them are drawing in the 200s, if not even approaching 300 people. Additionally, many people simply register in order to have better access to the recording afterwards. All of our recordings go up on YouTube. I can't even tell you after last night's event how many people have personally emailed me to say they would love a copy of the recording, they want to see the event, it made them think in ways they never thought they would, they're going to watch it 3 to 5 times. Even once we're back in person, I can imagine us taking our recordings to other schools, high schools, community colleges, UNC school systems and beyond, and then facilitating the types of conversations that we're having here at UNC. As we grow, these types of conversations could and should be open to all students, faculty, and others who are interested in the topic and who also value the importance of a constructive dialogue. Our theme, just to note, for the Abby Speaker Series next year is democracy and public discourse. We also held 2 events this year just for our campus community. These were around the election. The first one was called Public Discourse Post-Election, Is Dialogue Possible? A frontline perspective, and the other event was an academic perspective. The frontline perspective had 2 political operatives, a Democrat and a Republican, BJ Ruddle and Brett O'Donnell, and then the academic perspective had professors from UNC. Now I want to turn it over to the curriculum side. While it's important to expose students to a variety of perspectives through our public events, it's equally vital that we provide students the necessary skill sets to communicate their own perspectives effectively. Thus, our curricular component is designed to empower students with deliberative competence. Part of this also involves helping faculty to learn how to incorporate deliberative methods into their classrooms. As someone who does this, it's not easy. It takes time and it takes work, and we want to help faculty know how to do this. Kevin offers workshops for faculty in departments or schools. In fact, he's doing one for the law school tomorrow, which you all might find interesting to hear about in a moment. We also have attached ourselves to the new curriculum, and Kevin is working closely with the Office of Undergraduate Studies to help facilitate discussion and change syllabi for faculty to fulfill the communication beyond Carolina component of the new curriculum. He just met yesterday, as a matter of fact, with directors of undergraduate studies across the college to speak about this. Additionally, we are offering an all-day symposium for faculty on deliberative pedagogy in May. There are several panels faculty can attend, including facilitating and evaluating public discourse in the classroom and student perspectives on dialogue and debate. The last thing I want to note briefly is that we're also doing a lot of extracurricular work that is separate from our programming. We only hope to build on this further when we all return to campus. Kevin has developed a student program called the Agora Fellows. Kevin meets with this group of undergraduates bi-weekly, and they practice different forms of discourse and engage with one another on contentious issues. These are all, of course, moderated and facilitated by Kevin. We also are in the process of working with high schools to develop a model for civic engagement and civil discourse. We were approached by a student at East-Chapel Hill High School who wanted to connect with students from a different environment. We are now connecting students at East with students at Ashboro High School in a program we are tentatively titling the High School Civics Dialogue Project. I think this program has real potential to be a model we can take across the state. In summary, we have come a long way, especially given where we started, but there is still a lot of work to do. I think it was Kevin who yesterday noted to me how anytime he says to someone what he's working on and that he's a part of a program for public discourse, they nod and say, there couldn't be anything more important. We are established now. We have built some trust among our campus community, and we're eager to keep working. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you all today, and both Kevin, who's here, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Sarah, thank you so much for that. I'd encourage any questions or anything for Sarah or anybody else regarding this program.
I had one question.
Sure.
Thank you for your presentation. I thought it was great. And I think the initiative is fantastic. As you come out of the pandemic, do you anticipate that you'll be running the Abby seminars on a hybrid basis where it's both a live event and a Zoom event?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's a great question. I would really like to maintain the hybrid event for a few reasons. Again, the ability to record our events has been incredibly beneficial. It allows for that broader distribution, and it also has really expanded our reach. We have people watching our programming from all over the country. I think that's a huge benefit as we try to expand this program, as we should expand this program moving forward. I also, though, highly value, as I'm sitting here in my small office at UNC, being back on campus and all that those types of in-person conversations contribute to our ability to have a constructive dialogue. So I very much want to return to the in-person event model, but maintaining and keeping some of the assets that I think we learned during the pandemic.
Trustee Pryor.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I would like to hear more about the event last night. And it's kind of ironic because as a board member, we get all these notifications for events, and I somehow did not know about the event last night. And I'm going to sign up. I was just looking at the website now. I'm going to sign up, but please tell me what the event was about the future of conservatism.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I actually did a panel discussion for the Martin Center here not too long ago. And one of the things that a report that they were bringing to my attention, and I was a discussant on, focused on how poor university calendars are with regards to getting events on them. And I knew this event was on our calendar, but again, there's so much always going on here on campus that it can be hard to be made aware of everything. So I apologize for you not being aware, but to fill you in a little bit, the panel last night was the future of conservatism. The impetus in many ways for the event was kind of twofold. It was thinking about where conservatism as a philosophy goes, particularly in a post-President Trump world. There's many philosophies within conservatism. Sometimes you hear about the three-part stool, or there was an analogy last night of the four heads of conservatism, and how to bring those different philosophies together was very much a point of contention, or if one of those philosophies should win out over one of the others. The panel discussion itself was facilitated and moderated by Jed Atkins, who's the director of the Arete program at Duke. And then our panelists were Patrick Deenan, Yuval Levin, Daniel McCarthy, and Ashleigh Bagnulo. It was an outstanding conversation. I made a joke to someone last evening that my father wrote me and said that he was enjoying it so much, it turns out he might also be a conservative. And I think this, I jest, of course, a little bit, but I think it goes to the heart of what we're trying to accomplish here, which is making people pause and think about the reasons and the philosophies behind their beliefs, and then think about, what that might mean if they really do question them and put them under scrutiny. Do we want to change minds? And of course, sometimes you're going to watch a program and you're going to say, I absolutely now understand why I don't agree with that. And I'm now more steadfast in my own opinions and my own beliefs. But it also might contribute to at least a recognition that the other side or the other perspective is not as disparate or as far away from us as we might believe it to be. So it was an outstanding event, and it will be recorded. It was recorded. It will be up on our YouTube channel. And if you do register for our mailing list, you will be notified of when that happens as well.
Trustee Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for this presentation, and Trustee Duckett and I had the pleasure of being on the advisory board at the early stages of the program, and it's with Chris and your leadership and Eric's. It's gone wonderfully. Chuck, I'm going to take just a second because this topic is very important, and we're about to rotate out here over the next couple of months. In one of our first board dinners many years ago, we talked about, everybody went around and talked about values at UNC-Chapel Hill that are distinctive. And I kind of phrased it as Carolina's known for excellence with humility. And I think that's a real anchor value. And that this tradition of constructive dialogue that we've been talking about and that the program really stands for is so critical. And I know everyone, we're all talking about this and the importance of this, but I'm concerned that these traditions of dialogue that's respectful, dialogue that's authentic, that has a presumption that the other person's motivations are pure rather than evil. This program is going to give us the tools to get back to what I think has been a traditional, robust dialogue on and part of the value system at UNC-Chapel Hill. Unfortunately, the survey that was done not too long ago reflected that even at Chapel Hill, with those values and those traditions, we have a long way to go. That survey reflected a high percentage across the political spectrum, and this isn't just about the political spectrum. In this world in which we want to have authentic discussions across differences, we've got to be able to have a dialogue. But that survey was not comforting. The survey did reflect significant percentages of students who were not comfortable speaking up in class across differences. Most of those did point to student pressure as opposed to faculty pressure as the reason for their hesitancy. But I think there was also room to grow on the faculty side as well. And so this program, in a nutshell, I know I'm stating generalities, but this is, in my opinion, fundamentally one of the most important things we can continue to do. And I think we need to expand it and continue to support it along with the PPE program and otherwise, because it's fully in keeping with Carolina Next values, Mr. Chancellor, of creating a community that not only supports diversity across differences in ways of ethnicity and otherwise, but also in diversity of thought. And most importantly, the tools, if you can't express yourself across differences in a university context, what are we going to do in the future beyond the university? So thank you so much. I'm sorry I took a little extra time, Mr. Chairman, but this is a program that I think we could be hearing about every few meetings because it's so critical.
Thank you, Jeff. I would be remiss if I didn't thank some people for making this program happen. David Ruth and his group for raising the money and having the conversations about this that were so important. What the Abbeys have done is special. It's going to put this thing on a permanent track to make this university better. But I also want to thank the Dowds and Hardison family and people involved from Charlotte, Charlotte Pipe and all of their family for their commitment to this, because we wouldn't be here at this stage without their initial commitment. And Jeff was involved, and I thank everybody that's been involved, because I think this is, you talk about different legs on the stool. This is an important leg on the stool that is Carolina. Anybody with any other questions before we move to the next topic? Yes, Reese.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for your presentation. I just had a quick follow-up question on if you could elaborate a little bit more on the extent to how y'all select Abbey Speaker Series speakers or presenters. I know you touched on it a little bit, but I was just kind of curious on how y'all go about that.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. It's really within our team that is making these choices. And in making them, we're looking for issues that do illustrate viewpoint diversity as broadly construed and on important topics of the day. Hence the panels on free speech on college campuses, racial justice, and also the future of conservatism.
Thank you.
One last thing I forgot to mention, the man that's taken a lot of quivers and wouldn't like me to mention his name in this context, but I want to thank Chris Clemens for the work he put forth on this thing too. He's carried a torch and helped this thing come about during what was a tough initiative to get this going, and a lot of questions from different directions. So I just want to personally thank Chris. Okay, we're going to move on to the next piece, which is an action item coming to the board, and it's the continuation of the tenure clock extension. So I asked for Ron Strauss and Ann Fox to present this issue.
Sure. Thank you all so much for your time. There are some materials that you have before you, and approximately a year ago, you all considered a similar request. As you know, the pandemic continues to affect our faculty members, and I've been assisting the Provost's office with this request to you that you approve a temporary amendment for an additional year that would allow faculty members to apply for a single COVID-related extension of their tenure clock for approximately the next year, for May 21st, 2021 to May 22, 2022. And Ron and I are happy to take any questions you might have.
Questions from the board on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved. I'm sorry, who said it? I missed that part. Who made the motion? Oh, Kelly. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kelly. Second? Second. Mr. Brown, thank you. So I ask, having a motion and a second for approval, I ask for a vote on this issue. TJ, we don't need to call roll today. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, it passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is one that I always look forward to, and that's the employee forum update from Shayna Hill. doing all this walking around campus and everything else, and anybody that follows on what goes on down here in a year of COVID, I just don't think we as a board or a town or a university can thank all of the employees enough. So I look forward to hearing from Shana, and always do.
Thank you, Chair Duckett. Good afternoon, UNC family. Once again, I thank you for allowing me to bring updates from UNC staff. I wanted to use today's time to share some history with you. 4 years ago, I went to my then supervisor, Dr. Lauren Patton, and I asked if she would support me in my decision to run for the Employee Forum chair. I fully expected her to protest my decision, as this new role might take away from my service to the department. But she surprised me. Being the consummate educator, she answered with a question. Well, what would be your platform? I have never forgotten this, because it made me challenge my motives and focus my efforts. I answered I would always lead with my heart. And for 4 years, I have shared with you staff updates as I see them through the lens of love. This has been amazingly joyous and extremely painful, as staff have experienced some incredible challenges in the last 4 years. This month marks a year since our worlds were torn upside down. Many of us were forced to turn our homes into our offices, and many of us masked up and continued coming into an uncertain and scary work environment. But the common thread is that we all pulled together and kept things going. We graduated students, processed paychecks, and accomplished countless other achievements. In my primary role, there are only 4 staff members, and in the last year, 2 of us have experienced the death of a parent without the ability to say goodbye. 1 of us has experienced a family member medical emergency. 1 of us has experienced the death of a beloved family pet, and we have all experienced sacrificing vacations and travel to keep ourselves, our families, and friends healthy. But on the flip side, 1 of us got married in a lovely civil service at the Hillsborough County Courthouse, and all of us have become closer and created a special family-like bond. And now, as we have all experienced at least part of our vaccine protocol, and spring is bringing new blooms to the lives and a sense of hope in the air, we are preparing to return to our workspaces, only to find that, oddly, our clothes no longer fit. A year in pajama bottoms has taken a physical toll as well. Why am I telling you all of this? Because I think it is easy to overlook all the things we've overcome when we are operating on this pandemic emergency mode. And it might not be obvious to those looking in from the outside what battles we have been fighting. The staff in my department alone have had more life events in the last year than is normal. We are, by definition, quite literally a group of traumatized people. And we're not alone. There are hundreds of departments all over campus made up of traumatized people who also have banded together and quite heroically kept their units going. So I encourage all of us to recognize each other's challenges and triumphs as we move forward to try to bring the pieces of this giant puzzle back together again. Things to look forward to. Next month, Wednesday, April 21st, is Administrative Professionals Day. This gives us about a month to plan to recognize the literally thousands of staff members who have had to redefine their work environment, master new platforms, and juggle the chaos of a global pandemic, all without missing a beat. June 8th will be our 3rd Carolina blood drive with social distancing and COVID safety restrictions. It is important to note that during the last blood drive, we exceeded our goal under very difficult circumstances. And in July, we will welcome the next Employee Forum chair. It is my sincere hope that you will be as welcoming and supportive to the next chair as you have been with me. I consider myself to be incredibly lucky to have been able to serve during some very historic moments in our university's history. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Shana, thank you so much. Anybody have questions or comments for Shana? Shana, thank you. Your people do an amazing job, and I think you've done an amazing job as their leader. So thank you. Next on the agenda, we're going to move to the economic development strategy, and it's going to be presented by Kevin Guskowitz, Chancellor Guskowitz, and Doug Rothwell. And we look forward to hearing about this initiative.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Duckett. And I just want to, before Shana jumps away, I want to just say, Shana, thank you so much. You have most certainly led with your heart, but also with your eyes and your ears and your voice, which has been so important to me and to our campus community. So we're grateful for all that you have done in your leadership role, but will continue to do. So thank you. So I want to now introduce to you a new initiative for our university called the Carolina Economic Development Strategy. As part of Carolina Next, our university is committed to the economic development of our town and our state. Last year, Carolina alum Doug Rothwell came to me with an idea and a plan to make Chapel Hill one of the most vibrant college towns in the country. Doug Rothwell is an executive in residence for the economic development with Innovate Carolina. Before relocating it back to Chapel Hill last year, Doug and his wife, with his wife Sharon, Doug led an effort as president and CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan to grow the state's economy. Doug is a director of ITC Holdings and the Chapel Hill Downtown Partnership. He has graciously volunteered his time to develop a new partnership between our university and the town of Chapel Hill to revitalize and further economic development in this town that we call home. You'll hear more tomorrow about how we're going to reach 100 counties across the state through another important initiative, but I want to focus today on discussing economic development in Chapel Hill. And this initiative will leverage our ability to attract talent and inspire innovation in Chapel Hill. As I began discussing this initiative with several of our alumni and donors, they were eager to contribute private discretionary funds to help cover the cost of this endeavor. So I'm certain there's going to be a great return on this investment. So I want to thank Doug for putting our vision into concrete steps and offering his expertise in service to our university and to the state. And I want to now turn it over to Doug Rothwell.
Well, thanks so much, Kevin, and thank you for letting me work with you on this important project. And good afternoon to Chuck and the rest of the committee members as well. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so as Kevin just mentioned, what we talked about this fall when we got together was, what can we really do to make sure that both Chapel Hill and North Carolina can really come out of this pandemic in a really positive way, and also recognizing that our community and our state, face some really significant economic challenges if we're going to compete in this global economy. So Kevin was gracious enough to hear me out and just embrace the idea of Carolina getting more involved in playing a leadership role in economic development. So if we go to the next slide, this will explain a little bit, why are universities focused more on this topic? And I think it's a couple of things. First of all is that universities recognize that our nation is not going to be able to compete in this global economy without the innovation and the talent and the research that comes out of higher education. The universities need diverse revenue sources. And with government funding becoming more and more uncertain, this is an opportunity to develop private partnerships to a greater degree. And it's also a way to attract and retain talent, because as the community's vibrancy goes, so goes the vibrancy of the university and their ability to get the faculty and students and research talent that they need. And finally, of course, that all relates to protecting the brand that the university has itself. If we go to the next slide, I think that these are very similar reasons why Carolina would want to focus more on economic development. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so it's, first of all, North Carolina as a state, while we're growing, the reality is that incomes here are lower than most other states. Chapel Hill is, a relatively prosperous community, but the fact is that we don't have a very diverse industry base. We have a distressed downtown. We're not attracting and retaining as much talent and startups as we'd like to see. And the vitality of the community really impacts the ability of the university to be able to attract the most talented students, faculty, and researchers. And if that's put in jeopardy, that eventually that ends up impacting adversely our brand and also potentially our rankings. So if we go to the next slide, as Kevin mentioned, this work is critical to achieving the goals that are in Carolina Next and the strategies that are outlined in that blueprint. We go to the next slide. So the work that I tried to do for Kevin was to, first of all, benchmark Carolina to where we stand in doing economic development work compared to our peer universities across the country. And what I found is that most of our peers have very well-defined economic development strategies and organizational functions that are in place, usually championed by the president. They've established a single point of contact to make it easier for businesses and communities to work with them in terms of trying to promote the growth of the community. Most of the universities that compete with us have more robust business incubators and accelerators than we do. And most are also focused on trying to grow and have specific programs to grow the target industries that their regional economic development organizations have established. They're very actively involved in recruiting businesses to co-locate next to their campus. And many have even extended their services like maintenance and policing beyond the campus fence line because they realize that the neighborhood that's adjacent to campus is a reflection of the campus itself. If we go to the next slide. I guess in one sentence, how I'd really sum up what the best universities do in the field of economic development is that they really embrace their role as being the anchor institution of their community. It's not unlike the way a big company would in a company town, where they realize that the community is only going to be as strong as they are and how much energy and effort they put into making that community strong. And so I think if you look at, for example, universities like the University of Pittsburgh or the University of Pennsylvania and the work they've done in those two communities, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia respectively, that's a good example of the kind of role that universities increasingly are playing. We go to the next slide. I also had a chance to interview about 30 different leaders within the university and also in the Chapel Hill community. And I found a lot of similar themes come up. A recognition that Chapel Hill is not keeping up with our peer college towns, including those right around us in Durham and Raleigh, and that the town of Chapel Hill really can't sustain a long-range economic development strategy without the university as a partner. I heard from some of the university leaders that we're already seeing some adverse impacts of Chapel Hill's relative lack of vibrancy in terms of our ability to attract trailing spouses, diverse younger candidates, candidates in the hard sciences, not retaining promising startups because there's nowhere for them to go. Research partners can't be co-located in Chapel Hill, again, because of limited space. And we don't therefore have as many placement opportunities for our interns and graduates next door as we'd like to see. Economic development in Carolina is diffused. There's no one place really that's responsible for organizing that effort. Yet the great news is that looking at the resources that we have, the networks, the assets that we have, this should be an area that we should be able to lead in and really leapfrog over some of our peer competitors. So if we go to the next slide, go one more slide, please. Yeah. The other thing I did is I tried to look at Chapel Hill objectively. My background in economic development, I've worked with a lot of corporate site location folks, so I tried to put myself in their shoes. I also tried to put myself in the shoes of a prospective faculty member or parent that maybe didn't have as many ties to Carolina as I did, and walked the town. And what I found, frankly, was that the town and the area adjacent to campus just really doesn't live up to the expectation that we would have of being the top 5 university that we are. And I say this as a resident of downtown Chapel Hill and somebody that just moved here. So I say it with love and affection. We go to the next slide. So all of this led to basically 3 recommendations that I made to Kevin that he embraced. And the first of which is to create a more distinctive and positive first impression when you come here. The second is that we catalyze a downtown innovation district to really get more people working in Chapel Hill, and that we cultivate a network of places in and around Chapel Hill for those folks that can't be located downtown. And if we go to the next slide. So the first of these is to create what we're calling an adopt a block program. And this is no different than a company that would adopt a mile of highway along an interstate to keep the litter picked up. It's that the university will adopt the blocks on Columbia and Franklin adjacent to campus to basically keep the streetscapes clean, the street furniture well maintained, make the area more distinctly Chapel Hill with better plantings in the planter boxes, more colorful crosswalks, introducing some art and light that really gives it a really distinctive feel. And we want to get the students engaged in that effort as well, both in terms of their labor, but also their ability to raise funds and really have some fun as well in taking ownership of their community. And our hope is that this is a model that can be extended through the rest of Franklin Street in the future. If we go to the next slide. The second is really about then catalyzing a downtown innovation district. The innovation districts are being put in place by a lot of universities across the country. And our goal here really will be for us to mobilize our network of relationships with contractors, vendors, employers of our graduates, business and research partners, alumni, NGOs we work with, to approach them and say, look, if you do business with us, we want you close. We want you to have a presence in Chapel Hill. And then for us also to then try to create some of the space where those folks can go so that they can do it quickly and they don't have to go through the normal process of long-term leases and the like, creating some co-working space for them. Some of this work is already getting started at the CVS building right on Franklin Street, which is being turned into an innovation hub by the developer there. And that might be a place for us to go ahead and get started with some of this work. And then if you go to the next slide, we do realize that, not everybody we talk to may be able to locate in downtown Chapel Hill. So one of the things we'll have to do is to identify some other places in and around Chapel Hill where they can locate. And one of the things that we're doing there is to, for example, down in Chatham County, Innovate Carolina is working to create some space down there where that might be able to happen. The one other thing I wanted to mention, if we go to the next slide, is just how we're going to do this work. And so the Chancellor has put together a Economic Development Council that he's asked me to chair. This is a group of about 15 to 20 university leaders that initially is going to be focused on trying to recruit the businesses to consider locating in Chapel Hill. The second is the naming of somebody to be that kind of single point of contact to be able to coordinate all aspects of the program, but also to make sure that as we have business leads, they don't fall through the cracks and we're able to locate them here. Cheryl Waddell from Innovate Carolina is going to be that single point of contact person that we have. And then the third is that we create a task force with the town of Chapel Hill to be able to not only make sure that we're working in sync in terms of any development that happens, but that we create also a plan, a master plan for the development of this innovation district that will last beyond just a couple of months, but into the years ahead. And the mayor and I are going to be co-chairing that task force with a number of university and town officials. And the first meeting of that group is actually going to take place Friday of this week. So if we go to the last slide, our goal is to move fast on this work. Our hope is to begin to recruiting businesses as early as June. For the Adopt a Block program to take effect in August fully. We're going to maybe even try to pilot some work this spring. And then hopefully see businesses moving in by the new year and the master plan for the Innovation District completed in the first quarter of next year. It's exciting work. It's exciting to see the things that could happen in our town that's so synonymous with Carolina. If we can get those two working in tandem, there's nothing that we can't get done. So again, very excited to work on this. Appreciate Kevin's support, and we'll take any questions that you have.
Question for Kevin or Doug?
Mr. Rothwell, my name is John Pryor, and I've lived in Chapel Hill for 20 years. The vast majority of that was in downtown Chapel Hill until we moved out into the country 4 years ago. And I applaud what you're doing. The merchants of this town depend on the university in a way that it's hard to fully express. One of the greatest problems I think the downtown area faces
And it's been this way for a long, long, long time. If you go and try and get a cup of coffee at Starbucks at 7 in the morning, you're going to have to pass multiple people on the street that are panhandling. You know, that doesn't necessarily bother me, but anyone that moves to Chapel Hill and sees this, the first thing they say is, why on earth can't the town do something about that? And I will volunteer to help you however I can. But I think that that is something that is going to need to be addressed, and I hope you will do so.
Yep, it's a complicated issue, and it's one that I know that the town has tried to deal with a number of different times. And there's some, some real limitations in terms of, how you can handle that as well. But I appreciate, John, I appreciate your support and look forward to working with you to figure out how we can make this all happen in a good way.
Thank you.
Doug, I have a question for you. This is Chuck. Are you getting buy-in from these merchants and people that John specifically mentions? I mean, I don't spend as much time here being from Winston-Salem, but I spend quite a bit. But I've always noticed, to me, there's so many changes in the businesses right here in front of what is the university on that area of Franklin Street. And Carrboro seems to have bought in more to really economically develop. What's in the process, or what do we see from the end of the people that own these buildings? And some of them are the merchants and some of them just rent, but what's the buy-off on their part to be a part of this? And what do you see going forward that they do in conjunction with the university?
Well, I think that the idea would be to catalyze more partnerships. I think what we want to show is that somebody's got to kind of take the initial step. And I think it's great that the university is willing to do this. But, one of the things we said when we talked with the town even was that, this has got to be a partnership with the town as well. It can't be all on the university. And I'd say the same for Chuck. The issue you're raising is that for this to be a success, it really has to extend throughout the rest of the downtown, not just these 2 blocks we're talking about. And that's where the merchants and the owners of the retail buildings and the like are going to also have to step up. But our hope is that if we can, put a model together and show how this can work and how it can look, if we do things the right way, that's going to stimulate other people to step forward as well.
Yeah, Dave, I'm sorry.
Doug, this is Dave Bolick. Nice to see you. Just along the lines of what Chuck had asked, I am curious as to what the response has been from the town leadership, from the town manager's office through to the city council and mayor.
Well, I defer to Kevin on this as well, because Kevin had a conversation with the mayor just this past week. Kevin, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Sure, I'm happy to. Mayor Heminger is very excited and engaged with this. A little over 2 years ago, when I was asked to become interim chancellor, I met with the mayor very shortly after that and talked about the importance of the university always being viewed as an asset to the town of Chapel Hill, and likewise the town being viewed as an asset to the university. And I think this is an important next step. We also talked at that time about the need for a downtown master plan, which we haven't had one, as far as we know, haven't been one in 25, 30 years. So this is an opportunity right now to do this. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to structure the commercialization of our research and to best position our work in the marketplace. We've talked about that innovation hub being an important part of this, and I know Mayor Heminger is very excited about that. I think it further illustrates that we are taking seriously the responsibility of this university and the town to create jobs and to help drive the economy for the region. So she's fully on board, and I believe that the town council is as well.
Thank you. Doug, I've known you for a few years now. Appreciate the Chancellor and for your involvement here, because you really are an expert in this area, and I hope we are fortunate enough to see this thing through with your talent and helping us. So thank you.
Appreciate it, Chuck.
Okay. The next, what we need to do on the agenda is I need a motion from Trustee Artis Neal to go into closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the University Affairs Committee go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 1, to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22, and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 5, and subsection A, subsection 6.
A motion, do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So this time we'll go into closed session. So we're going to go right into it because I'm ahead of you, TJ.
Okay, Rob, I just pushed the feed to YouTube. Please confirm when we're live.
We're up.
Okay. We're coming out of closed session back into open session. Is there any other further business to come for University Affairs Committee for March 2021? And if not seeing any further business, I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second? Thank you. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're back in, we are ending the University Affairs meeting. Thank you.
We've got about a 5-minute break now until 2:20 for the next committee.
All right, everybody. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started.
All right, good afternoon. Want to call the meeting of the External Relations Committee to order. It's a pleasure to see all of you, and it is a delight to be back in Chapel Hill for our meeting and to be in person and be able to look around the room and see each and every one of you. And I hope that all of you have remained healthy and well through this pandemic. We're going to shift around the order a little bit today, and why don't we start with a resolution for a pen design. I want to pause and say that one of our fellow trustees, Dave Bullock, has taken this upon himself, working collaboratively with Joel Curran and his team to design a trustee pen. And I want to thank Dave for all of his hard work on that. Thank you, Dave. And I'd like to turn it over to Joel to just offer a few words.
Thank you, Chair Davis. And I just would like to commend Trustee Bullock. He reached out to me last fall and mentioned his desire to design a lapel pin that would be symbolic both of the gravitas of the position as a trustee and also reflect the brand in a way that we all know is unique and distinctive. And it was my privilege to bring in our UNC creative team. This is their world. They're extremely good at it. And with the direction from Trustee Bullock, we were able to come up with several designs that I think were really remarkable. The one that he selected, I think, was the best of them all. And seeing the final product, I'm really proud of that. And I do think that it will speak to the importance of the position and be worn proudly by trustees for many years to come. And thank you again, Trustee Bullock, for the opportunity to work with you on this.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor Curran. I'm very grateful for you, all the work that you and your team put in on that. I want to again thank you, Trustee Bullock. Trustee Bullock, would you like to read if I'm allowed to read the resolution?
Sure, that'd be great. And let me just say, I think Vice Chancellor Curran gives me way too much credit. His team really, I think, based on my conversation with him, took this as a fun project, but one that the team felt that would have some lasting significance that could become a tradition amongst board members to have something that was consistent with the branding and had a level of professionalism that we could pass on from here forward.
Very good. So what I'm about to read is a resolution that is being offered by Trustee Bullock. And so after I've read it, then we'll view that as a motion by Trustee Bullock, and then we'll seek a second. So be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill adopts the lapel pin for trustees, which is the pen that is in front of you. The design of which conforms to requirements established by the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for official insignia. Is there any debate, or is there a second from a committee member?
Second.
Second by Trustee Artis Neal. Any debate and discussion? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The resolution stands approved. And thank you again, Trustee Bullock. Very grateful. Very grateful. And
Thank Vice Chancellor Curran and his team, because they're the real superstars on this one.
Thank you again to you and your team, Vice Chancellor Curran.
Thank you.
Thank
you. UNC Creative.
So next, why don't we move forward with a resolution of appreciation. So there was a resolution of appreciation in your package, and this is a resolution of appreciation for Vin Stepanitis, who has been the secretary of the faculty council for, I believe, four years now. It might even be 6. Is it 6? 5 in June, and he has done an extraordinary job in that capacity. Before I read the resolution, I want to say that I have not had the opportunity to work with Ben until about the last year or so, but I have found him to be just extraordinary, not only in his research. His specialty, for those who do not know this, is in pre-colonial Native American cultures of the American South and doing archaeological work. And he has done some extraordinary research on that. It's a very important topic, certainly an important topic to the state of North Carolina with the many tribes that we have here and that we have had here. So a truly extraordinary person. But what is, I could go on and on with his academic qualifications, but what makes him even more extraordinary is his humility. He is a person who is both distinguished in the academy, but humble and kind and thoughtful, and a person who really loves our university and puts the university's best interest always at heart and is willing to have important conversations, recognizing that our university works best when we are working together. So I'm very grateful to him. That being said, I want to offer a resolution of appreciation. Whereas Vinkas P. Stepanidis provided outstanding leadership and keen vision to our university community as Secretary of the Faculty from 2016 to 2021. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis gave invaluable advice and counsel to the university's administration, including its Board of Trustees and faculty governance chairs. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis helped guide faculty governance through some of the university's most pressing challenges in its history, including a new budget process through service on the university's budget committee, the shift to remote teaching for faculty during the pandemic, and the implementation of Carolina Next. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis provided exceptional leadership in facilitating and coordinating the work of the various bodies and committees of Faculty Council by overseeing elections and ensuring that its critical processes run effectively and timely. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis served ex officio on the Faculty Council, represented the voice of the faculty on a number of committees to the general faculty, including the advisory, faculty executive, agenda, honorary degrees, university government commencement, and university day committees. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis frequently was called on to draft resolutions for Faculty Council and served as parliamentarian at the council's monthly meetings, ensuring that meetings ran smoothly. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis convened and chaired the nominating committee of the faculty and conducted the annual elections of the general faculty and the Faculty Council for 6 consecutive years, serving under 2 chancellors and 3 chairs of the faculty. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis annually organized the honorary degrees and special awards process, soliciting nominations and maintaining files of all nominations and citations, including composing and delivering citations for awardees at commencement, university day, and special faculty awards. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis managed and effectively administered the Office of Faculty Governance, which reports to the Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost. And whereas Mr. Stepanidis led efforts to prepare numerous Faculty Council agendas, maintained the meeting minutes, and all related materials of all meetings of the Faculty Council and of the general faculty, providing a wide array of support services to members of the Faculty Council and its committees. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill expresses its profound gratitude to Vinkas P. Stepanidis and offers its deepest appreciation for his thoughtful leadership, his unwavering commitment to the university and its faculty, and for his distinguished service. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Trustee Bullock, seconded by Trustee Artis Neal. Any debate and discussion?
Can I make one comment, if you don't mind?
Oh, yes, please.
Gene, thank you, but I've known Ben a long time. Worked with him prior to you taking over in that role, and Joe Farrell before him. And this is an important position, being Secretary of the Faculty. And but the work they put in, and just not to belabor all the things that you said because they're all correct, but he takes it so seriously. He's a kind man, a good man, and I thank you. And I'm glad we're doing this today.
Thank you, Trustee Duckett. Any other comments, debate, or discussion? Seeing none, there is a motion on the table to adopt the resolution of appreciation of Dr. Stepanidis. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The resolution stands approved.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
If there's
Chairman.
no objection, we can add this to the consent agenda for the full board tomorrow.
Is there any objection to adding this to the consent agenda? Seeing none, we will do so. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, let's move forward with the communications update. Vice Chancellor Curran.
Chair Davis, thank you again. It's my pleasure to come before you to give you an update, a snapshot really over the past several months and what the communications team's been doing on behalf of the university. And I try to make sure that these are both representative of what we do and also give you a sense of a lot of the positive news that's moving around about the university, because so much of it is emblematic of the work of our faculty, students and staff, and in ways that don't always get captured into the big headlines and things that you may be following. So it's my pleasure to do so. I want to open up by just remarking that a year ago, just over a year ago, we all moved into this world that we came to know very well of remote work and remote learning and remote instruction. And among the many ways that we had to change, we had just opened up our new visitor center on Franklin Street. And literally a week later, had to shut that down as we all moved into our remote environments. And there are two things that I'm very proud of that came out of that. One, we still see it as our responsibility and a privilege to provide access to the people of the state to their university who otherwise may not know the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And so over the months that followed, that team created a virtual tour. Many of you have seen that. And that alone was a great outcome from a really difficult and challenging event. But on top of that, they were determined that as soon as possible, they wanted to be back open to allow the people of this state to have access to that beautiful visitor center and see the university and what we are doing today to serve the people. And so with the help of the provost, at provost office and his team, they created a safety plan for how they would reopen safely, put all the right tools in place and follow the right procedures. For instance, limiting the number of people inside the visitor center to 10 at a time, and reopened several weeks ago. Now, we did not know what to expect. We didn't know whether we would have anybody or whether we had 5 or 10. But for the most part, we only wanted to open a few days a week so that we could be both accessible and also responsible to our employees and minimize their exposure. So perhaps you're not surprised to know that we got more than 10 on day one. We got more than 20, more than 50. We got over 100 in consecutive days. And on several days, last week in particular, we had lines out the door of people waiting to come inside the visitor center. We had a record day in the middle of a pandemic in Chapel Hill, where you just saw a wonderful presentation from Doug Rothwell, how we intend to really supercharge downtown in partnership with the town. And the visitor center is a great example of a core foundational piece of storytelling and experiential learning where people are hungry for that. And so I say all of that in that one of the greatest compliments anyone can pay is coming into the visitor center and telling us that they had a great experience. The next best thing is when they can walk outside and tell the people they don't know waiting to go in, it was worth it. And I was really proud of that. And I just want to say, give my gratitude and say that the team, Tanya Moore, who's our Associate Vice Chancellor who oversees that group, Rhonda Beatty, who's the director, and Spencer Anderson, who is one of our workhorse tour guides. They have just done a fantastic job. And I just want you to know that the people who are coming through that experience leave with a better understanding of what our university is doing today and the impact our students and faculty are having on the state now and will have for generations to come. So please be proud of that in addition to my own pride. So let me give you a quick snapshot of what we're seeing. And if you would advance the slides. As always, I tell you our media team are extremely hardworking and every day are fielding dozens of requests for media on campus and around the world. And just to give you an idea, they're highly effective. And these are stories that we are proactively pitching. So if you don't understand that part of our business, and many of you don't spend that much time in the communications world, you know, we do several things. I mean, we respond to media inquiries, which is more of a reactive posture. And many times we are creating those story opportunities by finding what's happening on our campus and creating a pitch that we then take to the appropriate reporters out there. And we know that this is the type of story they want to cover, and they are appreciative of that coordination and collaboration. And then we connect them with the storyteller, the person who's actually in the lab or on our campus conducting that important work. And when you see that this is not only is it highly effective, you see 95 pitches and we place 96 stories. I'm not sure how that math works. Somebody accused us of inflating by one, but I can tell you that that's efficient. But the key thing you need to know is that the media team every day, and I'm in the middle of what they do, and I can tell you that they work so hard, so passionately to connect the people who are creating those opportunities on our campus with the appropriate journalists to make sure that our story is being told, and frankly, so that those journalists can have access to the people who are breaking the news and doing the important research. And if you'll flip the slide, this gives you an idea of some of the stories that we see as an outcome. So obviously, our local media cover us the most closely, and then include the Daily Tar Heel on that. But these are the types of stories that you'll see. And a lot of that is being driven this year, over the past year, by COVID and the research that we've done on this campus, the remarkable work that's being done in so many areas of our campus that is COVID pandemic related, not just in the health sciences field, but also just in how our staff have responded on campus to make it a safer place to visit. So many of those stories have been told. This is just a representative slide. And if you'll flip to the next one, it's more. So, we see some related to education, classrooms in particular, and so much research being done on this campus. It's hard for us to keep track of it sometimes. I'm thankful to the communicators who work across campus in those schools and units who make sure that we stay informed and do a lot of that work for us. And then, of course, the wonderful gift from Roy and Wanda Williams. Those are stories people love to read because it brings out the very best in the people who work here. And it's not always about the science. A lot of times it's about the heart. And I think Roy and Wanda are representative of so many in our donor community who give so much of their time and treasure back to this university and the people, and in particular, in this case, that Roy and Wanda have so much that we owe them for, and they give back so much of their time and talent and their resources, and we thank them for that. UNC.edu, I've told you before that this is really the portal into the publishing world of UNC. And we see a lot of places where you can read information on Carolina. You can get that in the general news, you can read it on blogs. But UNC.edu is the place where many of those stories will emanate. And we cover this university extensively. This is a multifaceted environment that has the story experience. We have curated stories. You can search for past stories, and it's just a workhorse. But this gives you an idea of what drives a lot of interest. And this admission story actually was posted initially in November, and then got more interest as the applications, as students were searching for admissions results. And that just shows you the power of great storytelling. It lives on for a great deal of time. And with the search engines being the way they are and our own search engine being so robust, we can help people find those stories very quickly and access information that's important to them and for the university. You'll proceed to the next one. We've talked a lot about the well. The well is our internal storytelling engine and works in an integrated fashion with UNC.edu and really all of our storytelling platforms. So they have a similar look, a similar brand identity. They're very much companion pieces. The well, though, is very directed at our faculty and staff, the employees of this university. And these are stories that are important to them. And naturally, so much of the stories this year have been focused on the university's response to the pandemic, the role that our researchers and staff have played in that response. And you can see that the readership is very high. And I can tell you that the greatest feedback we get is from our employees and staff who tell us what they like and what they don't like, from the data as well as from the responses that they give to us and our team. The well has a daily email push. I think you all see that, and that helps open up your day to what's available on that website. And we hope that you're taking advantage of that because it's a great way to organize your day around Carolina. Social posts. So these all work in an integrated fashion with UNC.edu, the well, and our media relations team. We use this to break news, to share stories, to amplify other stories from around campus. And I don't have to tell you all, social media is not just a way that we try to reach younger audiences. Many of you are active on Twitter and Instagram, TikTok. I can't imagine how many all of you participate in, but we really focus on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm sure I'm missing one, but this just gives you a sense of the types of stories that people like to follow. So, for instance, when you see the story on the right, the Instagram story, that's a record number of impressions for us on an Instagram story. And we're learning a lot about how our peer-to-peer communications have worked very effectively on communicating, the COVID community standards, best practices. And I compliment the public health education communications team, which isn't just communicators. It's comprised of faculty, other students, graduate students, staff who have worked together, bringing the best of their research know-how and communicating across a number of other platforms, and other diseases and ways that they've learned how to communicate, prevention. And we've learned a lot from them and how we've helped to manage the pandemic. But this just shows you how people have responded so strongly, and they don't want to lose the fact that things happen at Carolina even when they're not here. We're going to see things blooming soon on campus. You'll see not just content delivered by the university, but by people walking around, students and staff and visitors, and we will amplify those as well and share those with our broad community, which goes well beyond the boundaries of this state. It goes into a global communications ecosystem. We have people who love Carolina and love to be reminded of all of its beauty, and not just the architectural beauty and the natural beauty, but the beauty of our students and the people who make this a living environment. If you would, thank you. More stories, more amazing stories to share. And the sounds of Carolina in the video and the post that shows it snowing brought it more of a third dimension. So it's more storytelling experiences and shares, and you just see the engagement. These are the ways that we measure the effectiveness of social media. Impressions are just one way, but really it's all about how many people engage with us and share it, react to it, comment on it, and engaging with the university is what our objective is in that aspect. If you would flip it over, gives you another sense of more stories. By the way, interesting to compare and contrast two stories about the old well, one here and one in Rocky Mount. So it's just a fun way to look at it. I think you all know the story about Harvey Beach. And then finally, of course, people love the human interest stories, and they love to celebrate wonderful occasions. Like when we mentioned earlier on Wanda Williams and their generous gift, we had Steve Farmer and celebrating the scholarship in his name. And of course, this university has amazing student athletes who compete in 28 varsity sports. We are fortunate that we have high caliber elite student athletes who do very well. And in this case, we celebrated the national championship from the men's tennis team, the indoor national championship. And our constituencies love our teams, and they love to see the teams compete and compete successfully. And so that's always fun to watch the reactions to those as well. If you would advance. So behind the numbers, this is a series that I wanted to point out to you that shows you the power of the storytelling that we have in place and the ability to help not just our employees, but many others who are interested in the business of this university, understand more deeply the operations, the challenges, the resourcefulness, and the responses that we have to the many challenges that we're facing. So this is a series that is in the well. It's called Behind the Numbers. And this is a series that we just started a month or so ago. It is intended to be a 101 on the complex business of university finances. And for those of you who are in the business community, many of you are, you know that the business in the outside world doesn't always align with, in a straightforward line at least, with the business of a university. It is very complex. Our sources of revenue, our expenditures, the research community, and our appropriations from the state and grants, et cetera, they all make it for a very interesting stew. And we are trying to explain to people how those finances work. I think Vice Chancellor Knuffman and Associate Vice Chancellor Steve Agostini for their help. because it has allowed us to be able to bring in beyond layman's terms, but in a very simple and straightforward approach, how the business of this university works. And I think it's helped demystify the current budget conversation that can oftentimes be very scary for people who don't understand those complexities. And we are trying to debunk the myths and at the same time give them a more learned perspective and help them make their own decisions about how to best interpret the finance information that's coming out, and will continue to shape how we are building this university for today and for the years to come. And so I'm very proud of the team that puts that together. And that is the end of my presentation, and I will take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor. Are there any questions for Vice Chancellor Curran? Thank you, Mr. Vice Chancellor. Very informative. Congratulations on the huge success with the Visitor Center. That is fantastic news. And thank you, as always, for telling the many wonderful stories about Carolina. Next, move forward with Vice Chancellor Summers for a report from the Public Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you're a formal person, so let me apologize for not buttoning my coat. I still have a little more work to do to get back to my pre-COVID fighting weight. The good news is, though, that I was able to get my pants on this morning, which was kind of questionable about 6:30 this morning. So I apologize for that, but there is some good news there. A couple of quick updates from the state, General Assembly from the federal side as well. General Assembly, as you know, is now, since we last met, is in full swing of the long session. At 2 o'clock today, the governor released his proposed budget. I've been trying to skim it over there. What I can say there is a very strong pro-university budget. There is strong support for faculty raises, for university raises across the board. There is a bond proposal that he's putting out there. There's also a lot of capital infrastructure money he's putting out there as well. So a very strong budget from the governor. So what happens now is the General Assembly will take that proposed budget. They will look at it. They will try to find areas where they can align with the governor. And then they'll start their own process where they'll go through and they'll come up with the budget. And then hopefully we will have a budget that gets passed this year and is not going to be vetoed, but stay tuned. One thing I'd like to talk about now is on March 11th, Governor Cooper signed House Bill 196, which was the second of the COVID bills the General Assembly's passed. And of note there is there was a $15 million appropriation to the Policy Collaboratory. And what's remarkable about that is not only is it a continuation of the good work that unit is doing, but it shows the growth of the relationship between this university and its world-class researchers and the General Assembly. So we're doing a really good job of being more and more of a trusted partner to our General Assembly friends. That's a really good thing. So last summer, there was $29 million appropriation that went to our researchers. Now $15 million going to other COVID-related work, some of the sequencing and those kinds of things. So that'll be a project that you will see all 15 of the research campuses in the system working together. And that's the other benefit, is not only are we a partner to our General Assembly and the people of North Carolina, but a strong partner to our sister campuses. And so that's a really positive thing. So you'll see more about that. You hear more about that. But again, more trust in this university and the General Assembly. We always appreciate that. On the federal side, President Biden, of course, signed the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 back on March 11th. UNC got some additional appropriation that you'll hear more from Nate about later. But through the 3 bills that have come through, UNC receives about $88 million or so. But again, I'll leave that to Nate. Right now, Congress in the early phases of the budget cycle, of course, President Biden will submit his first skinny budget in this spring. Then Congress will take over and hopefully pass the 12 bills that need to pass between now and the end of September to have a federal budget package. So more to follow. We're still early in the legislative sessions, both state and federal level, but more to come soon. My guess is in May, we'll have a lot more of substance to talk about, but happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Vice Chancellor Summers? I want to thank you, Vice Chancellor Summers, for that report, and thank you for the good news about the governor's budget. And please let us know how we as trustees may help you in advocating with the General Assembly on raises for our faculty and staff, and on the repair and renovation budget, all of those things that we desperately need. Please let us know how we may assist you, and thank you to you and your team for all you are doing to advocate for our university.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we will move forward with, I believe there's one more action item before we go into closed session. And that's an action item, an amendment to the trustees regulation on honorary degrees. There was a proposed amendment that had been on the website and forwarded to committee members.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Trustee Bullock.
I'd like to make a motion to add a substitute amendment to the regulation regarding honorary degrees. And if I may pass that out to members of the committee.
Of course, absolutely, and please do. So is there a motion to accept the substitute? Yes, Trustee Pryor? There is a second. Thank you very much. So we are now considering the substitute amendment, and the amendment is before you. TJ, would you mind uploading that for us? All right. It's uploaded? Very good. All right. Thank you, TJ. So what you have before you is a substitute amendment to the trustees regulation on honorary degrees. Some of the changes appear to be technical in nature. For example, I believe that one of the people that we are considering for an honorary degree, which will be happening in closed session, will not be able to attend in person, but will be participating in the commencement. So we had to, I think there was a change related to that. Also a change related to if someone, if we vote on an honorary degree and approve it, but then a person passes away between that time and the time they actually receive it, the way it had been worded in the past, they would no longer be eligible. So there is an amendment related to that. An amendment related to trying to provide more inclusivity with the entire university community, since we are truly the university of the people, allowing not only the faculty, but also staff, administration, the student body, importantly, Mr. Student Body President, and the Chancellor and alumni and alumnus of our great university, the opportunity to recommend names of folks. So we want to be a more inclusive community that want to hear the voices of our entire university community. And then a specific process change related to the keeping of the names of that list and allowing those names to rest on a list for as much as 10 years. So that way, we probably have 15 or 20 names on our list right now, and names come on, and as opposed to people feeling as though they have to continue to nominate, just having a recognition that would be a 10-year period. So is there any debate and discussion? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Trustee Hopkins.
I'm not sure that I agree with the 10-year time frame. That seems a little bit long. Seems 5 years would be sufficient.
I hear that as a friendly amendment.
Yes.
And also I'll turn to Trustee Bullock. Do you accept that friendly amendment?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
There is an acceptance of a friendly amendment. Thank you very much, Trustee Hopkins, and thank you very much, Trustee Bullock. Any other debate and discussion? Any other proposed amendments? Seeing none, we will now move into a vote on the substitute amendment as amended by Trustee Hopkins, changing the 10-year time period to 5 years. And that is in section 4. So we will now move into a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The
Mr.
substitute
Mr.
amendment stands approved.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also move that resolution be put on the consent agenda before the full board.
Is there any objection to adding it to the consent agenda? Seeing none, it will be added to the consent agenda. Thank you very much.
And if I
Trustee
may
Bullock.
also just circle back to the lapel pin, if we could add that to the consent agenda as well.
Is there any objection to adding the lapel pin resolution to the consent agenda? Seeing none, well, that'll be added as well. Thank you very much, Trustee Bullock. I don't believe there's anything else to come before us in open session, so I will now entertain a motion from Trustee Artis Neal.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the External Relations Committee go into closed session pursuant to the North Carolina General Statutes, Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 1, to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22, and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 2.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Meekins. Seconded by Trustee Meekins. Is there any debate and discussion? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor of moving into closed session signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We will now move into closed session. And TJ, please let us know when you're ready for us to move forward. We are reconvening the External Relations Committee in open session. Is there any further business to come before the committee? If there is no further business to come before the committee, I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Motion made by Trustee Artis Neal, seconded by Trustee Pryor. Any debate and discussion? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed by like sign? The opinion of the chair is the ayes have it. The meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
John, you want a break before your committee?
Whatever you like to do.
What's the pleasure of the group? You want a quick 5 minute, how about a 5 minute break before finance? 3:50.
Okay, I think we're about ready to start again.
Oh, hear ye, hear ye. The Finance, Infrastructure, and Audit Committee will now come into session. And as you know, I am not your chairman, Haywood Cochran. I'm John Pryor, who is pinch hitting for Haywood, who is a little bit under the weather, but I talked to him and he's feeling a little bit better. But we're going to get going here in just a few minutes and try and stay on schedule. But first, I'm going to turn it over to our Chancellor for a few words. Kevin, please.
Thanks, Trustee Pryor. I just want to take the opportunity to publicly congratulate our new Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations, Nate Knuffman, this is the first meeting with Nate serving officially as the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations. And like many of you in the room here, I've been impressed with Nate from the day he stepped foot on our campus back in 2018. He's done an incredible job during that time, serving in 2 previous roles. And I'm just excited to continue working with him in this important leadership role. And I know that he has not only developed a sound financial model and budget for this campus, but alongside many of us here in the room, but I know that he is the right person to execute that plan over the next several years. And so, Nate, we've got a lot of confidence in you. You're going to do a great job. And so thank you for saying yes. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank Trustee Pryor and Trustee Kobe for serving on that search committee that landed us an outstanding Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations. And also want to thank our law school dean, Martin Brinkley, for chairing that search committee. Thank you, Trustee Pryor.
And Chancellor, I just want to thank you for putting both Trustee Kobe and I on that committee. I did not realize that it was going to take thousands of hours of Zoom time, but I'm so glad that we were able to help make sure that the process was fair, and it was, and credit to Martin Brinkley for excellent work on his end. So with that, we're going to turn it over to you, the Vice Chancellor of Finance and Operations, Nate Knuffman.
Thank you, Trustee Pryor, and thank you for the very kind words. I am thrilled to be in this role and very much look forward to working on the great leadership team, campus, and with this body moving forward. The first item on the agenda is a request for an increase in spending authority for 2 capital projects. The first is a $300,000 item of advanced planning for Marsico Hall and an MRI machine. The second is a renovation, an increase from $490,000 to $590,000 for Fetzer Hall Rec at Sports renovation. That's to cover some outstanding invoices on that project. Happy to take any questions. These items do require action by the board.
There being no discussion, can we get a motion to approve?
So moved, Trustee Davis.
Seconded, Trustee Kobe.
So moved. I'm sorry. Excuse me. There being no other discussion, we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes appear to have it.
The second item is labeled self-liquidating debt. I believe there are a couple slides to go through on this. So this item is a request to authorize the university to issue debt for the Moorhead Chemistry HVAC renovation project and campus safety infrastructure improvements. These items were self-liquidating debt, have previously been approved by the Board of Governors and also by the North Carolina General Assembly. We are now at the third stage of approval where we're anticipating moving forward to issue debt, and that requires a third and final approval and action, and that's what's being requested today. Next slide, please. In total, these two projects total $28.5 million, and we are confident we have the ability to repay and service that debt. Be happy to take any questions moving forward.
Is there any discussion? Can we get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes appear to have it. Anything else on your list, Nate?
I think development report is up next.
David, if you are ready. I know that Haywood likes to save you for last as the strong close, but.
All good, always ready. So Emily, I think you're advancing, or TJ, you're advancing. Okay, Emily. So let's review where we were a year ago. Literally 3 or 4 days before we went upside down. We were at $3,179,000,000 in the campaign. We heard and saw virus spreading. We didn't know what it would mean. 6 days later, we were all working remote. Next slide. And in that report a year ago, we had 4 of our units that had reached their campaign goals. Fast forward a year forward to the exact same date, and we're at $3,678,000,000. So in the time of absolutely being upside down, we have booked and closed $500 million in new gifts. And I assume everybody knows this, but until we don't book anything on a verbal, we don't book anything until we have a signed gift agreement from a donor. So $500 million worth of development activity was done in the last 365 days. We actually came into COVID about 9.1 months ahead of the campaign pace, fell down to about 8.2 in March and April, but have come back to 9 months ahead already. We've added 9,000 new donors to the campaign in that last 12 months. And if you see on the right-hand side, we've now had another group of schools and units meet their campaign goals and others incredibly close to their goals. Next slide. Signature initiatives are in good shape. The only one we're a little bit behind on is Arts Everywhere. That is more about still working on an Ackland building possibility and some gifts of art within the Ackland. But as you can see, all the other signature initiatives are in good shape. And I will tell you, the Carolina Edge is such an important initiative for the whole campaign around students. UCLA had $1 billion goal. They finished their campaign, they crushed it, but they only made 67% of their scholarship goal. So we're actually in pretty good shape, even though we're just a hair behind campaign pace. We knew that $1 billion was aggressive and we wanted it that way. And that's one of the things we really need to get done between now and 12/31/22. Next slide. So in fact, go ahead and click it one more time, Emily, if you will. So here's where we stand. We've been looking at these two numbers all along. And I showed you some numbers at the last meeting. We had actually pulled ahead after a great December and January. We're beginning to come into months last year that were pretty difficult. So the comparisons get a little more favorable to the year-to-date numbers, but we're at 323 now in total cash and commitments this year versus 358 last year. And again, that was right up to the edge of COVID, but not in COVID, the 358 number was. But 323 versus 334 the year before, all of it is in sniffing distance actually with the campaign launch year of 351, which had a lot of activity in October of that fiscal year as we announced the new campaign. So nice shape here. This is a lumpy business. We have multiple things that I know of right now that are in the process of being documented that could flip those numbers again positive any day. So next slide. Cash, we're tracking
nicely against last year's total. Again, we have some cash that's getting ready to hit as well. So all these numbers will continue to go up and down. We'd love to be in the neighborhood of what we did last year, given the extreme challenges of the pandemic. Next slide. March 30th, you're going to hear, you're going to see, you're going to feel the noisiest day of the development year. It's called Give UNC. It's when every single unit on campus explodes their social media and email. The smaller schools and units, and particularly small units, love this day because they can have as much attention as anybody can have. Last year, we had our Give UNC Day scheduled in March, pushed it back to June. Weren't sure we were going to be able to get it in, but we did. It was a little bit different and compromised, although we had a great outcome. Next slide, Emily. So 3:30, you're going to hear a lot of noise. Just to remind you where we've come from on this particular initiative, we did basically $2 million in fiscal 18, jumped to almost 6.5 in fiscal 19, and even in the compromised fiscal 20 did $7.8 million last year. Next slide. One of the reasons why this is important, and you could get comments from people you know saying, my God, can't Carolina coordinate their fundraising any better than that? I'm getting asked by 8 units on one day. That's what this day is designed for. But it's also, over the last 3 years, we've picked up almost 1,800, 1,900 brand new donors. This is the way you do donor acquisition these days. And once we get a donor in the fold, we can then thank them. We can follow up with them. We can begin to call on them. It's a great way to get an indication of interest from new people who want to give, and we start a new discussion. So next slide. I want to close with this. I can guarantee you that there was not another person in my capacity in the country that got a call from a head coach to ask to come pick up a scholarship check for our low-income signature scholarship program, the Carolina Covenant, and a program like the Chancellor's Science Scholars. I've never been so intimidated in my life in trying to make sure I got that check from Roy and Wanda into a secure place so it could be deposited. I almost felt like I had my first born child in the car, trying to get that one to safety. The video is really sweet. As you've seen, in just a second, Catherine's going to hit send, so you all have that video in your email box in case you want to see it again, use it again. It's a really sweet story. And I don't know that there's another head coach in America who loves the university he works for, and I'd say he and she with he and Wanda, like the two of them do. So that was a shot in the arm. We have had conversations open up in the last, since we were able to make that announcement, of people we've been trying to get to. They were saying they wanted to meet, they were saying they were interested, and this has pushed them over the edge to actually get in a gift discussion for scholarships, in particular, for the Carolina Covenant program in particular, and that's something we desperately need. So, Mr. Chair, that is my report.
David, I have a question for you,
Yes,
and I very much appreciate the numbers on this. And I'm just curious. I noticed the alumni participation at 25%. And I'm curious, among peer institutions, what is sort of the norm for what you want to get? Because I see that number, I think, gee, that's pretty high number. You got a quarter of everybody giving something. But I don't know how to measure that against what would be our peer institutions.
Yeah, John, we do have those peer comparisons. And what I'll tell you is across the country, participation rates have steadily declined as dollar amounts have gone up. So fewer and fewer donors generally are delivering bigger and bigger campaigns. But our participation rate is very encouraging compared to our peers, but I'd be happy to actually bring that back. 25% is good, but what you tend to do in the first part of the campaign is drive dollars as quickly and as big as you can. What you typically do in the last part of a campaign is drive participation.
Right.
So
So
that's
you're expanding
what
the base.
expanding the base, particularly getting prepared for the future campaigns. So that's going to be our focus over the next 22 months.
And just on the total donors, you got 192,000.
Yep.
What would that be against the universe of alumni through the living
So
alumni?
it's interesting, John. We have 330,000 living alums. So the 25% participation rate would give you a high 70s in thousands of donors. But we've got another 300,000 plus individuals in our donor base that have made some kind of gift to Carolina over the years that we cultivate very actively. The best fundraising shops in the world cultivate non-alum donors. Non-alum parents are a great source of giving. But you know, we need to find the people in the world who care about autism and care about gene therapy and care about cancer, get them into the fold, whether they have a degree or not. And if you think about autism just as an example, there's no reason our fundraising in autism should be limited to the people who have a degree from Carolina. So big push for non-alum fundraising while you're trying to keep that alumni participation rate as high as you can.
Are there any other questions for Vice Chancellor Ruth?
Thank you, sir.
If I can, I just want to say thanks. I mean, David, you and your team do an incredible job. What you've been able to pull off over these past 13, 14 months in the pandemic has been amazing to see those numbers. And I think the other thing that's happening right now is that David and his team are bringing industry partners in, unlike never before. And I think that's, David and I were, we've had two really important meetings just in the last week with industry partners that are going to help us carry out some of this important work. And that's a big part of the job that David does. I don't think people see on the average day. So thank you for your leadership.
Well, just having said that, that's really nice. But we also have a chancellor that likes development, is really good at it, connects with people, just connected with a executive in Germany, and that makes our job fun and easy. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Nate? You're going to give us a comprehensive annual financial report?
Yes, thank you, Chair Pryor. The comprehensive annual financial report. Each year we come before the board to provide an overview. You should have received a hard copy of that document. If you have not, I brought several with me today, and I'd be happy to follow up with you afterwards to provide a copy. I won't go through it in great detail, but I do want to provide a few highlights today. Next slide, please. So first, and probably most important, you should feel very confident in the numbers being correct as presented. We received a clean and unqualified opinion, and we're very appreciative of the great work of the Office of the State Auditor. Her team worked very hard and very well, and with our team, and we're very appreciative of all the work from our great our financial services, our accounting staff and finance team. It takes a great amount of work to produce the report, and we're very proud of the product. Next slide, please. In terms of the numbers, I think it's important to keep in mind, number one, these are slightly dated. This information dates back to July of 19 through June of 2020, so about nine months in arrears. And I think it shouldn't be a major surprise, but you can start to see the impacts of COVID in our financial performance and in our financial numbers. Our revenues were down year over year as we started to see some impacts in the fourth quarter of the last fiscal year. Operating expenses were up. That really reflects some of the personnel spend being increased in the first part of the year and that being fixed throughout the fiscal year. Investment, really the performance was up slightly with a little over 2%, which was up, but it was slightly less than the robust performance the year prior. All told, overall, despite the COVID impact, our net position remained relatively steady, which is an encouraging result. And we believe it really reflects two things. Number one, fairly strong performance in the first 9 months of the fiscal year. And then number two, the early actions we took as a campus to control spend in the fourth quarter of last year, helping to boost that result. Next slide, please. So we've talked a lot about the budget and budget process on campus, and I've just kind of highlighted a little bit of the financial or the annual report and the results there, and wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking through how these two views of finances really compare and integrate. So first, on the annual report, that's really a backward looking at an aggregate level, and it's really results oriented. So it's a results document. When we think about our budget, it's really forward looking on a cash basis,
and a plan. And we've been spending a lot of time investing in solidifying our approach on the campus in terms of our budget, so that can really work in tandem with and really work toward informing those results, so that we really can have a more mature process around our planning and our budgeting process. So really both views are important. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on the annual report. Also happy to have our team follow up on some of the details on any of the detailed numbers as well.
Mr. Vice Chancellor. Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Please, Trustee Bullock.
So on the annual report, was nice. I read through it, and maybe this also goes to the Chancellor and also to Mr. Brown, whose resolution at the last meeting related to the increase of enrollment at the university and the university's commitment to increasing enrollment. If you look at that last section in the annual report, you can see that over the last decade, our enrollment has been ostensibly flat. What would be the financial impact moving forward with our Chancellor's commitment to increasing enrollment? I mean, how is that going to reflect in terms of our ability to move forward financially?
Do you want to address that, Chancellor?
I'll have Nate describe the financial implications of the sort of moderate growth, low to moderate growth that we're talking about, and how tuition dollars and increased enrollment growth would affect that. But we do have a committee that's working on, a task force that's working on enrollment growth. What they came back to us with for this year was that to do it responsibly, we were only going to be able to grow this year at a fairly low rate, 75 to 85 students. But I hope that we can increase that for next year. But we're not talking about hundreds of students over each of the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think, Chuck, weren't you on that committee?
Yeah,
aren't
I
you?
am. The only thing I'd add to that, Kevin, being on that committee and having, I've done a lot with admissions since 1995 when I went on Board of Visitors and was on the in-state, out-of-state cap question. And the only thing that I want to say about, we have grown enrollment quite a bit, especially last year and this year, by far the biggest classes we've ever had. So this is a small enrollment growth on top of that. So we've got substantial growth compared to where we had been at that level for quite some time, but we're way larger than we were a few years ago. There's so many things that go into this related to the in-state, out-of-state cap, also out-of-state tuition and how things are funded. I mean, this gets so complicated, it'll make your head spin at times because financial aid, everything else that's involved as to what ends up being our net take from it all, or our net funding. So it's extremely complicated. And let me say too, in all of that, we have to take into account where are the fields where we actually have room. There's classroom use and things like that. We have a lot of classrooms, but a lot of it's overlay between people at different times. And we do have openings at times, but some people don't teach during that time, or people don't want to take classes during those times. So it's a very complicated model. We will have a comprehensive plan on that. And, but we don't have a lot of opportunity to grow substantially right now. I don't think in the near future, unless some funding really changed, because you have to hire to do it. We can't just have more students and not have more professors, because that all goes back to the quality and what people want to come here for. So I just want to say within that, we've had pretty significant growth the last 2 years, and we're going to grow it a little bit more, but it has to be really planned out and detailed as to how to do it. And the people that are working on that and the people in enrollment are really doing a great job of exploring.
Yeah, I talked to Rachel, and I got a good sense that the plan was comprehensive. I just wanted to emphasize again the resolution we passed. I mean, the state of North Carolina is growing exponentially, and we're going to have to, and I do understand it's complex, but the complexity cannot keep us from meeting the needs of the growing state. And because we're having people, I mean, we're up 1 million folks, 950,000 people from the last census, thereabouts. I think that's right, Mr. Summers. I think I'm pretty close to that. And I just want to make sure that, I mean, not make sure. I mean, I want to know that, want you to know, Mr. Chancellor, that the board supports your efforts in terms of growing that. Because when you look at that annual report, and I agree with Trustee Duckett that over the last couple of years it's increased, but we had more than a decade of zero growth. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was flat, and that has not been. That's not reflective of the growth in the state of North Carolina. So, and I understand we've got some tough decisions to make and some efforts to go forward. I just want you to know, at least from my perspective, I certainly support that. And I think that was a glaring thing that I get from that annual report, is the need to continue to increase enrollment and opportunities for people in the state of North Carolina.
And we are committed to it. And Rachel and the committee's done a great job. 85 to 100 students in each of the next 3 classes. That would be about a 2 to 2.5% increase. Over each of those next few years in the incoming class.
And she had expressed to me the program that you had discussed with us. I know that was put on hold with the global initiative of students that start out in a study abroad program, which helps us expand our enrollment without having to necessarily immediately accommodate those slots in classrooms on campus, because we can then spread our students out globally. And she expressed to me that I think that is a program that'll be moving forward rapidly post-COVID.
Yeah, Carolina Way, I think it's going to help us. And Nate, I don't know if you want to add anything to what the financial sort of the cost benefit ratios are.
Sure. 2 considerations. One, I think it's noteworthy that the demand for enrollment here at Carolina, it's held up through COVID. There were some concerns, and a lot of institutions of higher ed have experienced some softening there. So I think that's noteworthy moving forward in terms of an ability to add enrollment, to be able to have that conversation and to think about it in terms of meeting the needs for the state. The second piece is on the financial, and the fact that we're having an enrollment working group, and that we've really been spending a lot of time thinking through strategically and analytically what the dollars may be involved with increases at different levels and different strategy, I think is beneficial. It is complicated, but certainly adding people adds tuition and appropriation under our current model, so it can be beneficial financially. However, it's not as simple as just adding those two elements. There is an offset with financial aid, and then there is some infrastructure needs in terms of investment there as well that you have to capture to really capture the net. But there is some benefit financially, certainly.
Any other discussion? I'd certainly encourage everyone to take a look at the annual report. There is a great deal of information provided in a very user-friendly, readable way with appendices for detail. So kudos to everybody in your operation that helped put that together, Nate.
Thanks.
Move on to the budget update.
Yes. So next item is a university budget update, and really I'd like to spend most of our time on updates on new information since we last talked about the budget in January. So, and then number 2, really turn it over to add a perspective from a school and recognize Fawad, the Dean of the School of Education, to really walk through the experience of the School of Education in meeting some of the budget targets. So first on the university budget update, and as we've talked about over the last several months, Carolina really faces 3 major financial challenges. First, a structural deficit, which is really a mismatch between our recurring revenue and expense. That's evolved over several years, and we estimate it to total about $100 million this current fiscal year. Secondly, COVID-19 losses.
These are primarily impacting our income producing units on campus, including athletics, housing, transportation and parking, faculty practice of the School of Medicine are some of the major units impacted. And we estimate the revenue losses could total as much as $200 million this fiscal year. And lastly, deferred maintenance. In Carolina's deferred maintenance backlog is estimated to be $850 million and growing, so very significant. Next slide, please. So updates on what's happened with respect to our efforts to address our structural deficit since we last talked. Really, over the November, December, January, and even February time period, a lot of engagement with campus leadership, unit finance leads, discussing their budget expectations and different options in terms of meeting our needs to balance our budget as a campus. Ultimately, in January, we issued a memo directing a 1.5% reduction of personnel funds and a 7.5% reduction to operating funds. In February, units then returned draft plans that really looked at meeting those targets. And I'd say overall, the plans reflected a very serious thought. It was a very thoughtful and deliberate process. And we were very encouraged by the plans. We've since in March, very recently, gotten back to units with a final plans to move forward, and those are moving forward. Next slide, please. So again, why are we doing this? And really, what do we expect to have happen? Well, we do expect, if these actions are taken and successfully implemented, we expect to eliminate our $100 million structural deficit and be in balanced budget position by fiscal year 22. And many have asked, well, why are you doing this now? And really, we believe it's prudent and fiscally responsible to do that. Taking no action is really not sustainable. And moreover, the UNC Board of Governors has increased their scrutiny and demands for fiscal accountability. We believe these actions really position Carolina well, moving forward to navigate that pressure, but also to position Carolina financially in a better way. What are the reduction plans and what do they look like? Units are primarily meeting their savings through largely eliminating vacant positions. This includes senior level positions. We anticipate generating $2 million in annual savings at the associate vice chancellor and vice chancellor levels in terms of reduced positions moving forward. We're also seeing consolidation of programs and some better utilization of space. In terms of strengthening governance, an element I mentioned being balanced in fiscal year 22. We also want to ensure that our finances are balanced for the foreseeable future. And part of that is strengthening our governance and making sure we're meeting with units on a more frequent basis and reviewing spend plans. And then lastly, I think it's worth noting, we're on pace to accomplish those goals while still protecting our mission. We've avoided large across the board furloughs or those types of actions. We've been able to prioritize certain programs like the VTA program and some opportunity hires. We've been able to revamp some important revenue streams like F&A. And really, we've really, I think, more quickly positioned Carolina for strategic reinvestment moving forward. So the second bucket, the COVID-19 losses, an update there, and Clayton mentioned a little bit of this earlier. I think it's some positive news. Carolina is set to receive a third wave of funding from the federal government that is estimated to total $45 million. This comes on top of the first two waves of funding that totaled about $43 million. Importantly, this third wave it does allow some additional flexibility. So we're now able to cover revenue losses when we had not been able to do that in previous iterations. We expect about half that funding to be allocated towards direct student aid, the other half to be allowed more flexibly for institutional needs. In general, we've spent previous funds on testing and PPE, student success support, IT and classroom support, and then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we're also evaluating the ability to use this for revenue losses moving forward. And lastly, I think an important note of the federal funding coming to the state, there's a large portion going to the state in terms of $9 billion in state relief. which they're still working through the parameters, and we may get some more clarity on that with the governor's budget today. Next slide, please. So lastly, on the deferred maintenance area, also some positive news to report there. The state recently revised its forecast, significant upward revision of over $4 billion. It's a 15% increase to where previous expectations were, as the economy just turned out to be stronger than originally anticipated. This environment, I think the major takeaways are really three. One, I think this environment is really conducive to potentially having a lot of one-time funding available, which may be favorable for repair and renovation funding. We're cautiously optimistic that there'll be some funding available for repair and renovation this year. I think number two, really it also reduces the probability of cuts moving forward in this current fiscal year or next fiscal year. Really that elevated and that better position for the state, I think really improves our outlook in terms of avoiding any types of cuts. And I think the third point I'd make is really, some have asked, well, given the favorable state position with funding and then this additional federal funding, why are we going through a process of really reducing budgets on campus? And I think it's important to note the type of funding that we're talking about received from the federal government, which has some restrictions around how it can be used, and also the state funding. That's one-time funding. And what we're trying to solve through our budget process is really a structural deficit where we're trying to align recurring revenue and recurring expense. And so I think it's important to keep those distinctions separate. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions on our budget process or budget update at this point, or can also turn it over to Fawad, and then we can address questions after his presentation as well.
Trustee Bullock, you have a question?
Yeah, it's not really a question as much as it is a statement. I just wanted to say Chairman Stevens had assigned each member of the board a school to be a liaison with, and I've actually met with Mike Smith over at the School of Government prior to his budget meeting with the Chancellor and with Nate and his team. And the feedback I got was superb with respect to how our Chancellor and Nate's office requested in I think, a very productive way, each financial unit of this university to justify funding of areas of interest, areas of growth, areas where things can be reduced with respect to how that matches up to the strategic plan. And so I'm a real fan of not putting that strategic plan on a shelf and letting it collect dust. So I just wanted to say that for the feedback I got, at least from the School of Government, is that budget process was thorough, fair, and at least was well received at that school. And I appreciated the fact that everything was viewed, or at least most things budgetarily speaking, was viewed through the lens of the strategic plan. Because I'd hate for all the work that Provost Bluen and his team has done to go to waste. I mean, that strategic plan, I think, is a living document, and we should remember that.
I don't know if the Chancellor wants to say anything. I'll just add to that on the search committee, there are representatives from the School of Government, and I could not have been more impressed with them.
Thanks. Trustee Bullock, I want to thank you for your comment. And I just want to say that I was really impressed with how our deans and unit leaders leaned in to this. We talked about this. I hope you had a chance to see the Well article on, I'm not sure, Joel, what day that was, but maybe last Friday. And really complimented the efforts of our leadership, the deans and their CFOs, because this was not easy, what we asked them to do. And so you're going to hear from one of them right now who really did a great job making difficult decisions. And so I think that's why we wanted to sort of illustrate how one school went about doing this. So thanks for your comments.
Okay, Nate, would you like to bring up Fawad? Sure. And I'm very eager to hear this, because I have heard what you have done at the School of Education has been a model. So we look forward to hearing from you firsthand.
Thank you. My name is Fawad Abdul Khaliq. I'm Dean of the School of Education. Clearly, everybody calls me Fawad for obvious reasons. with me today here is our Assistant Dean for Finance and Operation, David Churchill, and he's here in case you ask me hard questions. I've had the pleasure to meet some of you over the years, and I look forward to getting to know all of you. And I want to start by saying I hope that you and your families and loved ones are safe and healthy during these tough times. The educator in me, I have my lesson plan ready. Have a lot of slides, but a lot of visuals and big font. So be ready. Next slide. I surely would have preferred to be before you today here to answer a question like, Fuad, what great things would you do with additional recurrent funding to the School of Education? I'm here today to briefly discuss the approach our school adopted to address the directive from Chancellor Guskowitz, Provost Lewin, and Vice Chancellor Knopfman to, in effect, implement a permanent reduction to our recurrent budget of 3% in personnel and 15% in operating funding by the end of fiscal year 22. While my comments today are specific to the School of Education, I believe many of these themes apply to our sister units across campus. Next slide, please. You are well aware that Carolina has sustained $100 million in structural deficit for several years. Provost Lewin might recall this, his first meeting with the deans, item number 3, maybe after he welcomed everybody, he said that we had a huge structural deficit on this campus, to his credit. And the thing about structural deficits is that they do not simply go away. Addressing such deficits requires transparency, courage, and discipline, as well as strategic decisions. I want to acknowledge our campus leadership for their approach to addressing this deficit, which I believe exhibits all these characteristics. Next slide. I will start, though, with a few schools about the School of Education by way of setting the stage for you for entering to the process of addressing a permanent reduction to our recurrent budget. When I joined the school in July of 2016, we were reeling from combined negative effects of the Great Recession of 2008, followed by years of precipitous decreases in School of Education student enrollments. You probably know that young people are not interested in becoming K-12 education professionals, which is part of a consistent trend across the nation. Next slide. We came together as a school and launched an ambitious strategic plan, which was aligned with Carolina's Blueprint for Next back then, and the now articulated Innovations for Public Good strategic plan, spearheaded by Chancellor Guskowitz and Provost Lewin. Next slide. We invested in hiring 23 superb faculty members from across the state and nation, all rising stars or established leaders in their field. We now also are the most diverse we've ever been in terms of the racial and ethnic diversity of our faculty. We also did quite a bit of renewal in our staff. Next slide. We did make hard and strategic decisions to place some academic programs with low enrollments on hiatus and directed our resources towards newer and new academic programs. Next slide. We also invested in rebuilding our research grants and contracts infrastructure under the leadership of our inaugural Associate Dean for Research, Professor Jill Ham, and Assistant Dean David Churchill. Next slide. Our efforts are paying dividend. Among many other positive trends since 2016, we have seen substantial growth in student enrollments across our programs. These growing enrollments have translated into a 47% increase in total instructional units taught by School of Education faculty from about 14,000 units in 2015 to about 21,000 units in 2020. Next slide. We saw similar substantial growth in total research expenditures in the School of Education, increasing by 154% from $5.73 million in 2015 to $14.58 million in 2020. Actually, since 2018, we have seen the largest such expenditures since the school started reporting these figures to US News and World Report some 28 years ago. Next slide. The nation is taking notice of the significant progress we have been making. We have seen a major upward movement in our US News and World rankings, now 11 ranks higher than 2015. The school is now ranked 24 among all and 14 among public schools and colleges of education across the nation. And of course, we remain #1 in North Carolina. Next slide.
There surely is a lot more to our journey of progress over the course of the past 4.5 years, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about that story. Yet, at this point, I think it's fair for all of you to ask, just how much did we invest in terms of new recurrent funds in the School of Education to achieve this progress? It's a fair question. Next slide. And the answer is exactly 0. Our financial footprint in terms of permanent recurrent funds did not increase from 2016 through 2020. Next slide. All of our investments and growth were made possible because of faculty retirements, reconfiguring staff positions, increased research funds, and fundraising efforts, in addition to campus support and some VTI hires. Next slide. You could see why walking into the current reductions to our permanent budget was a very difficult prospect for us. Like our sister units across campus, we already were very lean. We run an efficient operation, and we are operating at capacity. We knew we were up against a very difficult conversation and difficult strategic decisions. Next, please. To their credit, campus leadership provided a set of 8 principles to help guide our approach to budget reduction. The most important is be strategic, don't pass the buck, think about investment in the future, think about growth, which were really helpful to us. And we took these principles to heart. Next slide. Like other units, we had 3 weeks from the day we received the budget reduction memo on January 13 to respond to campus with a plan. We launched an intensive and iterative consultation process with our faculty and staff. We surely could have used more time for an even more inclusive and thorough consultative process with all our stakeholders. Yet we worked within the allowable time frame, cognizant of the associated urgency at the campus level. Next slide. So we first held faculty and staff meetings right then on January 20 and 21st, respectively, to answer questions about the nature and magnitude of the budget reductions, and especially emphasize to our faculty and staff that these are permanent cuts to our recurrent budget. The possible impacts of these cuts, as well as discussing some guiding principles that were provided by campus. We had faculty and staff broke into groups. They sat down, they ideated about the process to help move the conversation forward. Next slide. Next, our area chairs convened faculty in their respective program areas to continue the conversation and discuss principles that should guide our approach to budget reductions. And a similar set of conversations was carried by our assistant deans and staff in their respective units, from business to human resources, instructional technology, development and communications, and student affairs. All this feedback, input, and ideas from all these meetings were summarized and shared with the leadership of the school. Next slide. We held yet a second set of faculty and staff meetings on January 27 and 28, respectively, again, sort of share feedback and the ideas to date. Again, faculty broke into groups, and now they were ideating about some possible policies and measures to move us forward. Next slide. Based on all these conversations, faculty and staff responded to an online survey, which we thought would be good to help them share anonymous individual feedback with us. The survey asked them the following questions. What do you see as the most essential parts of the mission of our school, and how can we protect those parts in the budget process? What values or principles should govern our budgeting considerations? What other questions should be asked, considered as we go through the difficult process? And do you have other comments or thoughts to sort of share with us? We got the data, analyzed it, and shared it with the school on February 5. Next slide. Here's what we heard from our community. In terms of priorities, we heard strong consensus about safeguarding the school's resources in service of our core missions of teaching and research, prioritizing a sense of our community and school responsibility to serve the state of North Carolina. What's interesting, because this was an anonymous survey, we couldn't tell whether these were faculty and staff, which speaks to strong alignment in the School of Education around our mission. We did see some variations in terms of prioritizing our undergraduate, professional, and doctoral education. Next slide.
What principles did we hear from our community that we wanted to heed in terms of moving forward? Need for transparency, timely information, and opportunities for community members to inform decision-making, equity, and attention to the well-being of our least highly paid colleagues, as well as our school community. The alignment between budget priorities and the school's mission to prepare education leaders across all levels and disciplines, the need to preserve and build on the school's strengths and move us forward, and attention to efficiency. Everybody's saying, let's streamline across our faculty, across our staff, across our administrator roles, and identifying strategies that can reduce expenses without cutting into the school's core goals. And respect for existing commitments to students, faculty, and staff. Next slides. So as we formulated our initial plan that we shared with campus, we focused on the following elements. We always wanted to keep in mind that budget reductions generate high levels of concern and anxiety. They're extremely difficult, and that budget reductions will impact people, their jobs, and their livelihoods. We strive to work toward equity, and our approach was to ensure that all faculty and staff, including various tracks and classifications, as well as various programs and operations across the school, contributed one way or another to meeting our budget reduction goals. We wanted to minimize, to every extent possible, impact on personnel, and we needed to make the difficult decisions, including personnel decisions, in a strategic way with the following goals. Guard our core mission with a particular focus on producing leaders in education professions and the next generation of educational researchers. Focus on revenue generation, and position the school for continued future growth and not get us into a cycle of spiraling downward. And so what were some of the budget reduction measures or actions that we are taking as a school and that we shared with campus and got their approval? We wanted to optimize space use, which will allow us, actually it is allowing us to shed space leasing costs. We're reducing our recurrent professional travel budget for all faculty by an amount that's not going to cripple their professional engagement. We're streamlining our administrative structures to recover funds that we put towards administration. We have to reduce some course offerings, both in terms of the frequency and the availability of some of these course offerings. And unfortunately, we do have to take some personnel actions. Next slide. I do want to thank you for your time. This has not been a simple or easy process by any means, but it's actions that we had to take to safeguard our mission and to move forward. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you might have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And I'm going to turn it over to the board for any questions. I have to ask you, though, I think that what you've done is remarkable. And I'm curious what your reaction among peers at other schools has been. Have they been encouraging of what you have done, or were they, we wish you hadn't have done that because now we're going to have to do the same thing sort of reaction?
Actually, it's been overwhelmingly positive reaction. We talk all the time, the deans of our colleges and schools in the system, and NC State has made some great strides over the past several years, UNC Greensboro as well. So there's a lot of good things happening. So if there's any kind of dynamic, it's a positive dynamic.
That's very encouraging. I just point out, Trustee McCullen, here is someone who has done more with less within the university and managed to do so in a way that has kept it vibrant, thriving, and growing.
Can I say more with same? Don't take more from me.
Right.
More with same.
More with same.
And even what was really interesting with encouragement from Provost Bluen and Chancellor Guskowitz, we launched a joint program with NC State. It's the first of its kind, fully autonomous online program to certify teachers who are already in classrooms. And this program, which is about 4 years old, now jumped from 5 to some 200 participants. So not only are we sort of in a good dynamic with other schools, we're doing a lot of collaborations across the system.
We'll give you a round of applause, but I see that Trustee Duckett has a question.
Well, it's not really a question. I've been doing this for 8 years. This presentation is so solid. because this is the epitome of what constituents and people want to understand. What is this pain? How are you dealing with it? We know it's real, but my God, K through 12 education is the future of this country. And so it's so vital, and it's easy to take for granted, quite honestly, because we've had a good school of education here forever, yada, yada, yada. You know, there ain't much controversy that comes out of it, so a lot of people aren't paying maybe as much attention. This kind of presentation that has this kind of depth and detail is certainly most appreciated by this board, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, you know, our new logo or tagline, for lack of a better term, is Propel the World. And this is not meant to be any kind of vanity, but nothing happens in this world unless our future generations can read, write, do some math, and think critically. And I'm oversimplifying, of course, but that's our attitude, and I really appreciate your focus on K-12 education. The other thing I do want to say is, as a school, we have done a lot of collaborations across higher education on this campus as well, because good teaching and learning is needed across the P through 20. So, but thank you, your comment is much, much appreciated.
Any further discussion or questions? Chancellor, would you like to say anything? Very impressed, and I'm sure all the other deans of the schools were just as cooperative as Fuad.
Yeah, Fuad, thank you. I mean, that was outstanding. And again, we could have had, you know, any number of deans, center directors, vice provost up here that had to go through this exercise, but this was exactly what we needed. You'd made tough decisions, and I love the approach you took in involving your faculty, your staff, you know, in the tough decisions. And I know that we're going to emerge stronger from this. And once that budget is balanced, as we have said, certainly by June 30th of 2022. But as Nate and I have been looking at the numbers, that may be possible by December of this year. We may be able to balance that budget because of the fine work that deans and their CFOs like Fuad and David have done. So thank you. Yeah. And when that happens and that budget is balanced, we will have a reinvestment fund that will lean into that strategic plan that we've been talking about, and be able to fund these initiatives that this board approved on January 30th, just a little over a year ago. So.
And thank you for responsiveness, and thank you particularly for sticking to our earned FNA, as well as your support of the VTI hires. That has made a huge difference for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Fuad.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's give him a big round of applause, Fuad. Is there any further business to be conducted? If not, I'm about to entertain a motion to adjourn. But before I do, I'll just say that, again, thank you, Nate, for everything you have done. We're delighted to have you here. And for the rest of the board, you may not know, but Nate was quite the baseball star back in the day. And it's a good thing that fastball didn't get much over 100 miles an hour. He might not be here, but in the big leagues. So can I get a motion to a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
John, I'm going to report, John, that you were exactly on time.
I was trying to get it. I saw it.